I am currently finishing up my PIP semester at Kennedy Elementary in a first grade classroom. I have completed 2 science lessons, one about reflection of light and the other about recycling. For the first lesson, a probe was taken to determine what the students previously knew about reflection and what objects were reflective or not. I could tell from this that the students really needed to see the objects in person for themselves. I brought in objects for students to view at each table, giving them a hands-on way to observe and determine if they were reflective or not. I made sure that I asked questions, keeping them engaged throughout their investigations, then sharing their results with the class after filling out their data. For the second lesson, students were able to discuss together what it meant to reduce, reuse, and recycle in honor of Earth Day. This made students aware of everyday items that they could use to reduce, reuse, or recycle. We talked about many items around the room and at home we could do one of the 3 R's with, and even discussed ways we could change our habits to keep the earth clean. Students were able to then share their promise as how they would keep the earth clean. Students truly became aware of these actions of recycling must be repeated in order to make a difference on Earth. My first graders are currently in the pre-operational stage of Piaget's theory of cognitive development, and both lessons were designed to target this group. While researching this stage and while designing my lessons, I learned that students think symbolically, which is why I chose to use pictures on my probe for the first lesson for them to use as a visual. The picture stands for something, which is a big factor during this stage. As for the second lesson, I took into account that they would be using a high level of imagination. Students gave me very outside of the box answers when describing what we could recycle at home. Some answers were not completely logical, which is very typical of ideas from students at this age. We also watched a video which I really think helped them visualize what actually happens when we reuse, reduce, and recycle. The video was a very good visual aid for the students to really see what happens during this process, and I think it was a good way for them to understand the process and really get a grasp of what it means to recycle. Once my first lesson about reflection was completed, I was able to see what the students took away from their explorations and observations of the objects around the room. They filled out a chart organizing the objects. The original probe was a really great assessment that allowed me to plan for what I needed to teach during the actual lesson because it was obvious that they didn't understand what reflection truly meant. For the second lesson, students were to fill out a sentence starter worksheet. Once the lesson was complete, they were able to share their own ideas on how they would relate to what we had learned in class to something that they could do on their own time to keep the earth clean. The students absolutely loved both of these lessons. While completing their reflection lesson, the students were so excited to move from table to table to observe so many different objects around the room. It was very encouraging to see, and I think that my CT was encouraged too. We both were so happy to see how excited the students were to learn about science because they finally were able to have a hands-on exploratory learning experience. One student even told my CT that this lesson was her favorite of the whole year. The second lesson was exciting too because we learned about something more applicable to the real world and discussed ways that they could make a difference at home or at school to help the earth. I even had some students tell me about a plan they had for once they got back home, creating their own recycling bin in their kitchen. I was inspired that this lesson allowed students to feel that they could make an impact. I feel that I have learned so much throughout this semester and that I have grown as a student as well as an educator. Although there were some battles throughout in the late nights creating the perfect lesson, I learned that mistakes happen and there can be bumps in the road. But throughout these, I was able to grow and become better at handling these situations that were very new to me. I am also very thankful that for the environment that I was in. This school was unlike any that I have ever experienced, and I am so glad that I am able to take this with me as I go into the internship and eventually have a classroom of my own. I feel that the lessons I taught were very beneficial to the students' learning, and I hope that they stick out to the students as they reflect on their first grade year. I feel very fortunate that I was able to teach them science and allow them to explore since they do not normally get the chance to do so. I definitely think that I would teach both of these lessons again to my students. I think that they were perfect for the first grade level, and I really do believe that making it hands-on and enjoyable for the students and even interactive with the video for the recycle lesson was very beneficial to their learning. My students were incredible as well as my CT, and I am just so fortunate that I was in the classroom environment that I was. I feel like I can take away a lot for my future classroom, and I am very appreciative of this experience.